Welcome to the Strategy Sherpa Show, a series of organic discussions between hosts David Chavez and a variety of notable business leaders centered around their most significant failures and how they handled those challenges, so listeners can learn from their most teachable moments and apply the lessons to their organizations. Now, here's your host, David Chavez.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Strategy Sherpa Show. This is David Chavez. I'm here with a fantastic guest we'll get to in just a moment. But I just wanted to remind you of why we do this show. I think that there's a lot of material out there from entrepreneurs about what they've done right to grow their companies. However, there's not a lot of things out there talking about some of the mistakes we made along the way, because we make a lot of mistakes to get to right. And I think that a lot of times business owners forget about, that mistakes are part of the learning process. And that's really what we're doing on this radio show, is we're sharing our mistakes and what we had to do to overcome them, or, deal with the problems that came with the decision that we made that didn't work out as well as we had liked. And today I got a great guest. This is a very powerful lady in herself, and she runs a mental health facility, and I'll let her explain that to you. But this is Christi Cessna, and Christi, where are you at this morning?
What city are you in? Nashville, Tennessee.
All right, Nashville, Tennessee. So we have you direct from Nashville, and I'm in Ontario, California today. So you're in Nashville and I'm in California. And tell us a little bit about you and Christi and how you ended up on my show and what you do now, all those things.
Well, I'm originally from Arkansas, and first person to go to college in my family. Ended up finding myself being a therapist, and then quickly found myself being a leader in mental health organizations and behavioral health. And have lived both, I'm from Arkansas originally, like I said, but moved to Arizona and then ended up being recruited to come here to Tennessee, and met you, David, through a mutual friend who and former colleague who actually we worked together. And it was just by happenstance that we were talking one day and talking about women and leadership, and had the chance to meet you and been able to work with Assured Strategy to help really grow our organization. Integrative Life Network is a family of trauma-focused programs around the country. And right now the mental health crisis is real. I think many people in business have seen their workforce be really impacted by that.
Yeah, I love that you said that too. And yes, I haven't worked with you very closely. My partner has, and you and her have worked together for quite a while and in different capacities over the years. So you guys have a very long, strong relationship. But then you and I had the opportunity to work a little bit together this last year, just because of all the change that's going on. And I think it's really interesting, the field you're in, because it's probably in such high demand. Why is it? What's driving the demand? What's the big thing that people are coming to get help for?
The demand, I think a lot of it has to do with the sense of anxiety or stress that people are under. And it's fascinating to watch. I'm a mom of 3 pseudo-grown children. They're in their 20s or late 20s. And that particular age group oftentimes I think are really struggling. The lack of connection that they have in terms of a sense of community or with something bigger than themselves. I mean, a lot of their connection has to do with, their attachment to their phone or social media, or coming from an external sense of who they ought to be, or a lot of FOMO, missing out, those sorts of things. So I think it has eroded who we are as humans, right? That we are really built for social connection, and that has been torn apart. So you're seeing, suicide rates go up. Sadly, you're seeing a lot of fentanyl, a lot of mothers my age, that have lost children. And it's just, it's really heartbreaking what's happening to our country in that way.
Yeah, I think the kids today, it's just a lot different than when we grew up, and I'm sure that people said the same thing when we were growing up too. Um, I,
Absolutely.
I think it's a lot different, but the big thing is that all the bad effects that came out of keeping people locked down, and especially kids and things like that. And we don't want to get into a political conversation, but I think that so your business is probably getting busier and busier because these things take a little bit of time before they start showing their all the side effects that end up happening. Is that a fair comment?
I agree. And I think that the pandemic, pros and cons of it all, in terms of us all working together, working at home and having that freedom, what happened is a lot of folks started seeing things happening. You couldn't hide, you couldn't run to work and hide. We're all under one roof. And sometimes that just enhances, issues. And certainly there was a lot more drinking going on. But also things that maybe were hidden in your family are now come to light. So I think that's what brought more awareness of the need.
Yeah.
And at the same time, the amount of stress. I can't imagine being a mother, of young children, trying to work, trying to help them, learn on a laptop or whatever the issue was. It was just a crazy time.
Yeah, yeah. And
Mhm.
so that has made your business flourish a little bit, but let's switch the gears and talk about some of the things. So your career, how did you end up in the position? What's the track you've taken so people can sort of understand your position? Because you run a fairly good sized company now, and you're accountable for the P&L for that thing and making sure it works correctly.
My career path was really, it came quite natural. I had started off, like I said, as a therapist and realized very quickly that one, the stress level of that job. And I needed to be really present for my kids. I'm pretty outgoing and I'm pretty engaging. So found out that there was a whole nother side of the business, for lack of a better word, where I could meet with clinicians from around the country and quickly moved into leadership. So at that time in Arizona, I was running for really a very large team in business development, and then quickly moved into operations at some point. And so that's how I came here to Tennessee. This field that we work in is actually quite small in some ways in terms of the network, because it's really quite collaborative. We want to help people. I mean, that is the basis of what we do. So it's important that we know who our quote competitors are, because we need to refer to those.
Right.
And when I came to Nashville, it was a very small organization. It was one brand, and it was losing money. And I have a reputation of being able to really put organizations on a national platform, national visibility, and know how to get the word out about the great work that we're doing. Now, I don't work for just anybody. I also want to make sure that the work that's happening is aligned with what I think is really strong clinically. So with that, I have, been able to have a reputation where people trust me, that any place I'm going to align myself with is going to be a good program.
Yeah.
So that's where we started with Nashville. We were able to expand the services and the continuum, became very, went from losing money to actually breaking even within 6 months.
Oh, wow.
So that was pretty impressive. And then we were able to acquire some other programs or partner with other programs from around the country. So we have the Integrative Life Center here in Nashville, but we also have Begin Again Institute in Colorado. We have Shadow Mountain in New Mexico, and then we have a new program called Sauna at Stowe in Vermont.
Yeah. Okay. Very good. Well, yeah. And then which branch do you run?
Currently, I am running the Integrative Life Center, and we went from where we were managing about 20 some odd beds to over 60. So in a very short period of time.
Okay. Yeah. So you have a lot of patients coming through. You've grown it quite a bit. You've been a part of the helping the growth of the whole organization across the board, and there's a lot of opportunity for you in this organization. And unfortunately, you have a lot of patients right now too, because you're pretty busy, right? So but also that's good that you're there to help people. So let's jump into it, because we like to jump into the nitty and gritty here, and let's just why don't you take a few moments and just outline the situation where you didn't make as good a decision as you thought you made at the time you made it, and then we'll maybe take a break after that, and then we'll come back and talk a little bit more about the details of it.
When I was preparing for this, I had a lot of things, to consider. And I think the first one that popped out for me is just realizing that while I may have started and growing this organization, I realized that, I did not bring resources in at pivotal times. So, some of that had to do with probably my own belief system. As a woman, I think sometimes that we put our needs last. So anything from, I think I had shared with you, I really think I need an executive assistant. Well, this is crazy to think that I have been doing this for as long as I have and have never had an executive assistant. I would give other people executive assistants before I'd give myself one. So it's this idea of servant leadership maybe taken a little bit too far. And realizing, that I wasn't advocating as strongly as I needed to. One of my mottos about who I am and how I'm designed is I find a way. Well, that's great. That means I'm very tenacious. I'm very determined. That's a great thing you want when you're trying to build something, when you're trying to grow something. What happens, though, I think is, or in this particular case, is that there was a point where I needed to pause and say, wait a minute, we've outgrown where we're at right now. Right now, we started with in kind of a survival mode. We're losing money. How do we course correct? And I did not recognize quickly enough that we really needed to reset, and we needed to invest in our staffing and take things in order to just really take things to a higher level. That means I need to bring in more resources. We probably would, not be as flush, if you will, with cash, but we needed to do that in order to really to propel our organization forward. So really, bottom line is I just spread myself too thin. That was a very
we're gonna come back to that. You spreading yourself too thin right after the break, because we need to take a break right now. And I just wanted to remind everybody that we do have webinars if you get on assuredstrategy.com events, and then we have a live event that I wanted to talk about just real briefly right now on November 9th in Phoenix. We are doing accountability could be easy, but and then just how much of your time is wasted due to lack of accountability in your company. We're going to be overcoming some of those obstacles in accountability. But we're going to take a break, Christy. We'll come back on the other side, and then we'll get started diving into what happened. Thank you very much. This is a Strategy Sherpa Show. This is David Chavez. We'll be back right after the break. Christy, during the break, the voices from above came in and shared with me that I'm breaking up a little bit at times. So I'm going to try to keep my video on, and you never know how the hotel internet's going to perform. So I'm in one of those situations right now. Unfortunately, we're on the show doing this live. So let's get back to what you were talking about. So you right before the break, you said that what happened is you're a resourceful person. And so what I heard you say is that you had some projects to do and you didn't allocate all the resources you probably needed. Why don't you go through a little bit what happened as a result of you not allocating the resources that you actually needed, and just trying to have that great old mindset that leaders have of, I'll just get it done with the resources I have, right? Just make it work.
Yeah. I wish I could have gone back, about some time ago. What really happened for me was that the result is actually there was some restructuring that had to happen. I mean, when I think back to where we were not too long ago to where we are today, I mean, I did not have a COO. Well, I was able to bring that person on, which was great, but I did not have an implementation director, didn't have a VP of strategy, did not have a CFO, did not have, even other layers underneath. So that's from the larger parent company. And certainly that affected our ability to move very quickly, more nimbly. But even at the facility level, right, we did not have the resources there in terms of really supporting our clinicians. So, in our field, and I think in any field, you really have to look at how stress can play a role in your decision making. So if you are going and you're growing, a lot of the things that we talk about, not to get too heady here or too focused on psychology, but when your stress goes up, when an organization is under stress, your higher level of thinking, your executive functioning really goes offline, and you start getting to really more of a more primitive brain, if you will. And so you're focused then on more survival, like I said, and more about creativity. Your decision making is not as strong, or where your priorities are not as strong. So all these things actually get affected, and it trickles through the organization, and it hurts morale. So those were some of the impacts.
And what you're talking about, for the audience's sake, and if I'm wrong, please correct me, because you're the expert here in this area. It's really fear that does it, right? It's fear sends us into our fight, flight, or freeze mode. And so why don't you explain that a little bit to people? Because that's probably what was going on a little bit.
It was, and it wasn't just going on just personally with me, but also with others, right? So, when you're stressed, you get more reactive, right? Your attention goes on other things. You really can't affect strong change. So your overactive sympathetic nervous system goes into, like you said, fight, flight, or freeze. And you start, that side effect is that you start rejecting new ideas, your focus goes down, it actually even affects your body. So oftentimes what will happen is you'll start noticing that people are doing a lot of things, but it's just with the idea of this belief that you're being productive. And instead, what you really want to do is almost slow down for a minute to reinforce the sense of stability or safety for people, and that brings on that higher functioning, right? That brings on your higher level of thinking. So, not to jump ahead too quickly, but one of the things that the outcome, I guess, the blessing in all of it is that I start my morning very differently now. It's important for me to spend time meditating, even if it's just for 5 minutes, just to kind of make sure that I'm completely present. Because if I, as a leader, am not, grounded, then in fact, that's going to trigger other people at work. And
most definitely.
Yeah. So the things that I think that I noticed, and I just did a presentation on this on trauma-informed leadership, and it's from this author, Daniel Goleman, and he wrote a book about brain and the emotional intelligence, and he talked about triggers in the workforce. And I would say this definitely happened, that there was a sense of a lack of respect, or that people were feeling like maybe they were treated unfairly or underappreciated, or just not being heard, or having unrealistic deadlines. All those things all together create a culture where, when you're in the helping field, you want to have a more grounded culture, a more sense of safety, where this culture, would certainly impact, like I said, just creativity. And you need to be creative and thoughtful.
Yeah. So what you're saying is that you didn't allocate the resources that you had, and what ended up happening is it caused a lot of stress on the team. Stress resulted in some fear, which fear led to fight, flight, freeze, which ended up causing us to have a lot of activity going on, but not a lot of results going on, because the brain just can't focus correctly to get that result that I'm looking for. So how did you get that back under control? I mean, because when our people are in that position and we're the leader of the organization, it's very challenging to get people out of a fear state. Yes. So share with us some of the things you did, because I'm sure that'll be hugely valuable for everyone listening.
Yeah. And the simplest thing is really connection, right? So one of the things I had to do is I had to do it department by department. So the first thing I had to do is look at, okay, what's our outreach look like? So we have a national team around the country, and it was clear to me that there was something off. I did a quick survey, did a net promoter score just to say, hey, how likely would you recommend this organization to work for? And it was not good. It was really not good. And I was like, okay, I know where we got an issue. We've got a staff right now that is feeling very demoralized, very
unappreciated,
underappreciated, all those things, right?
Yeah.
So having that, first of all, just being accountable to say, hey, listen, guys, getting that feedback and then acting on it. I mean, that's I don't mean to oversimplify, but that really was what I did, is being able to have meetings with them, hearing what was going on, and then making changes based on what they asked for. The worst thing I always say you could do is to ask for a survey and then do nothing with it and say, thank you very much for the info. You have to act on it. So that's what I did.
What you just said is so important. I mean, I have clients from time to time. They tell me that, yeah, I've surveyed my employees. Okay, well, where's the results? I don't know. Well, have you ever looked at it? Yeah, we looked at it when it first came out. Okay, well, what did you do with it? Well, we took some of the points and we did a few things, and then they're wondering why they're not getting any feedback anymore. It's because they didn't end up really following through. You have to close the loop with the employees. And I'm not doing anything with this feedback is closing the loop. I try to say that to people all the time. That's all employees need to keep on giving you feedback. So you listen to the employees, you surveyed them, they tell you they're tired, they're frustrated, so a decision you made led to all of this, right? And now you have to clean it up. And so you just did it department by department in a very good way. What is some of the comments you got when you started diving into this and realized that you had to get this fixed? What were some of the frustrations you were hearing? Like what were people saying to you?
Mostly that they had been siloed, and it kind of brought me to, another issue that I had, another mistake, as you and I have talked, that this idea of that balance of, I bring in a new leader, you want to give them the autonomy to do their job, right? You don't want to feel like you're going behind them or undermining their authority. Well, the reality is that there was some sense of silos. There was this, I wasn't getting the information. The information wasn't going both ways. It seemed like they were giving information to certain people, but it wasn't making its way to me. And once I figured that out, it was like, okay, I need to do things differently, just overarchingly, not just in this department, but completely. Any new leader that I'm hiring now, I want to make sure that I let the leader know, hey, listen, this isn't about undermining your authority, but I'm going to go ahead and have these conversations, and that's what I want to do. And I know that in the past, what I had done when I started getting hints of things, of, hey, there's something that's not quite right, I ended up instituting a 360 review for all the staff. And that was really, really a beautiful thing to get back the feedback to say, oh, okay, this is interesting, because people will present differently based on, who they're with. So as a supervisor, I may look very different than, how I present to the board, or to my owner, or to my colleague, right? So again, it's just important to get that 360 so that you can figure out how best to support that leader, or realize that, hey, this may not be a good fit culturally, for this organization. This isn't the direction we're heading.
Right. So what you're saying is, because some of the problems crept up, it started having you look at some of the leadership and how things were going, what was going on. You did the 360, and did you discover anything? I mean, you probably discovered things that were good and some things that were challenging. What was one of the things that were good?
I think that for leaders that, if you're coming into a new organization, it's one thing when you inherit, your team. And so you definitely saw, there was a difference, right? Where the people who they had hired, they knew who they were coming to work for. that's different than the person maybe who, had already been there. Right. So again, the people that had already been there, they'd been there for a reason. And there was a set culture. This was a different culture over here where, they had hired somebody in. That was the first thing I noticed. It just seemed like there was just a very stark difference between those who had come in versus those who didn't. And by the way, I couldn't tell, it was definitely anonymous, but you could tell that seemed like there was a division, and that's the assumption I made. I'm just going to say that. I don't know that for sure. I'm assuming that's what it was. But later, I think that's what I realized after months and months later. I figured that one out from my conversations.
Everyone, you have no idea how lucky you are to listen to this show and listen to Christi right now. You can just see the humility she has as a leader. I know her to be an amazing leader, and this is just coming out in this podcast so far. So we're going to take a break, Christi, and then going to come back, and we're going to talk about some of the challenges with that 360 and what you had to start doing to uncover some of those things. So we're going to take a break. We'll be right back. Strategy Sherpa Show. This is David Chavez. Hey, everyone. This is David Chavez. We're back with Christi Cessna, and we're going to be talking to her in just a second. But I wanted to bring your attention to our assuredstrategy.com events page, because we have a new addition to our team. Preston came to us to help our clients with process and getting process into their company. A lot of companies we go into, the processes there's no consistency to them between functional areas. And he's going to talk a little bit about the inefficiency that's costing you money. And what we're talking about is how processes sometimes create inefficiencies and how to fix some of those gaps. And that'll be a very informative webinar. And this is the first one we're doing on process in a while. So it'll be a really good one to come and visit. And Preston is just amazing at this. I think that he's an architect of processes, and the way he approaches it. Then my partner Kane, she'll be doing a webinar on the 26th, how to build accountability through meeting rhythms. And then she will also be doing the accountability could be easy, but workshop out of Phoenix. And the but is really getting the accountability back into your company to stop wasting time and be more efficient also. So there's a lot of efficiency workshops over the next month with us. And if you get on our page, you can find all that information. But let's get back to Christi and let's find out what happened. So Christi, right before the break, I asked you what was one of the good things that came out of doing the 360. And now what I was thinking is, like, what are some of the challenges that came out of that 360? Because, these are the types of challenge that I think challenge us as leaders the most. I mean, I love that you're willing to talk about this, because usually this involves a lot of pain on our part, right? There's a lot of emotional pain that goes into some of these issues. So.
Yeah, it has been painful, David. I mean, I think, again, I want to go back to, we're just, at the end of the day, leaders are just humans, right? We're just humans. We bring our own experiences to things. And, I think that oftentimes when you're in a leadership position, there's a reason that you have this drive. And I'm gonna out my daughter out right here in a minute. But I remember when she was in college, I said, hey, I want you to go get tested for ADD. And she was like, oh my gosh. And so she went to go get it. She comes back. She goes, well, thanks a lot. I said, well, what did you learn? And she said, I don't have ADD. Apparently I have a slight anxiety disorder of some type. And what I explained to her is that, we all are driven for whatever reason, whatever drives us. And for me, I know my constitution, if you will. I'm a little bit of an anxious person. And what's great about it is that it acts as a driver. However, if I don't take care of myself, it can tip over, and then everything we talked about earlier can come into play. It can really wreak havoc on how I look at things and the stories I tell myself, and it can create problems. So my advice to her was that, hey, embrace who you are. Just watch it. Just make sure you take care of it. And so again, that's why I say how you start your day is such an important thing. But I know you had a question about.
With the example you just gave, like when you don't know what's going on, that's even worse, because you can't even start to really deal with the issue. And so getting your daughter to understand to use people to help her figure out what's going on with herself at any given time, is very powerful, and probably lucky she has you as a mother, right? Because a lot of times parents try to stuff this stuff down and don't deal with it properly, and sooner or later in life it comes out. It may be in their 30s, 40s, 50s, and it'll come out. And so you're going to have to deal with it sooner or later. And I think what the example you just gave is, and I would also recommend that to a lot of leaders, sometimes going and talking to somebody really helps solve some of these issues, right?
Yeah, I agree. I agree. And I think just knowing how you're made up and what is that driver for you. So yes, I do have a lot of humility, but I think some of that is also showing up in other ways, right? Just that servant leadership and really wanting to help people do better. So when things were getting off track, for example, that was hard. That was very painful, to your point, and really affected me personally. Felt like that I had failed terribly, not just the organization, but the owner or the people who I feel like I have the the opportunity to serve.
Am I okay? I've had a
You
little bit of,
froze up on us.
yeah, I had a little bit of a video problem. I think it's gone now. So it's the great internet I'm connected to right now. So let's go back to the mistake. So in what happened is getting comfortable in relationship and granting excessive autonomy is how you sort of sum this thing up. Why don't you walk a little bit through what ended up happening?
Yeah, so from the 360 reviews, I think, what we realized was that, hey, there's a number of things I can do, right? So one is I was born in Missouri. It's the show me state. And what I realized is that I'm going to have to use that motto a little more personally, show me what you're doing. So oftentimes, we spend time with the people who are, that just need more, fill in the blank of whatever that means. They need more because they haven't been a leader before. They need more because they're the ones who always are knocking at your door. It's what I realized from that 360, it's the quiet ones. It's the ones that I have a lot of confidence in, are the ones who often I need to be spending more time with, right? And so that's what I try to do, is shift to say, wait a minute, I need to not just be focusing on those that are most vocal or the ones who, you might have challenges with, but I need to be focusing on also those who I may be taking for granted that do a really good job, or I assume are really doing a good job based on the accolades from their staff, right? So sometimes they're getting accolades from their staff because why? They're getting everything that the staff are asking for. Not that that's a bad thing, but there may be other requirements in the job that you've got to make sure are getting done, and holding those people accountable. And sometimes people, they believe being a leader is being liked, and that's not it. You got to have the hard conversations. One of our core values, for example, is being heart-centered. And I explain what that means is not that I'm always going to say the things you want to hear. It doesn't mean I'm just, kind, or as they call it, Nashville nice. It's actually being truthful and honest. And that is actually being heart-centered, to be upfront, and so that you're not always guessing about what's expected of you.
Yeah, it's not bless your heart.
No, it's no more bless your heart.
It's like in the South, if somebody tells you that, it's a derogatory term. So
yeah, it can be. Yes, it can.
Yeah, exactly. So you're dealing with people who aren't really speaking up. I'm not holding them accountable, because I'm not having them show me some results of what they've been doing. Oftentimes, I think leaders have a real hard time with this because as leaders, we're told that we're micromanaging when we ask to see things, right? And I have to explain to people that is not micromanaging. If I'm sitting there asking you to see your update every day, and then I'm sitting there telling you how to do the work, I'm micromanaging you. You're correct. If I'm asking for updates and I want to see the results of where you're up to date, that's not micromanaging, that's accountability. And I can tell you that, there's a lot of talk in books about psychological safety and things like that. When these situations arise, we're not always perfect at bringing psychological safety. And also, I think when you're just holding people accountable, it puts them on defense. Can you keep them out of defense? Yes, but not 100%, right? Because if they care about something, they're going to get a little defensive if it's not really done well. Is that a fair comment?
I do think it's a fair comment. And the other thing that I had experienced is that sort of the platitudes, right? Like being told that it's being done. And listen, you walk a fine line. Going back to what I said is, how do you ask the questions without undermining? And it's just, I think it's how you have the conversation with the employee, right? That doesn't report to you, that reports to one of your leaders, to say, look, I'm not going to be holding secrets here. So yeah. I'm asking questions because I need to understand what do I need to know here? But also to inquire about, hey, are you doing these things? Because these are foundational to the work. I'll tell you, certainly those spot checks are important, follow through, making sure that, certain projects were taken care of. It's important because, sometimes what can happen is that there's deflection, or there is citing, hey, I just don't have enough resources. And what you realize is that there will never, ever be enough resources. There will never, ever be the perfect time. There will never, ever be, you know what I mean? Like, so it's that balance of not just disregarding what's being said, but it's that, hey, how do we have enough for now? But again, remembering my big life lesson here, which was that, hey, not asking for resources sooner. It's a balance. It's a real balancing act.
Yeah. And I love how you say it's a balancing act, because you want to be careful with resources, because resources are so valuable, especially in a growth company like yours. And then also we're trying to balance having enough resources so we don't burn people out, send them into fear, cause that flight freeze problem, and just really try to help them be productive at what they're being. Because as leaders, and you talked about servant leadership, our job is really to break all those problems down for them, right? And help them resolve them so that they can do their jobs. Right?
Yeah, and it is. And the other thing I noticed too is that sometimes what people will do is that they'll just get busy, right? We're just busy being, quote, productive, but it's really like you're just working really hard but not smarter. So
and I'm gonna jump into that right after the break. So I'm sorry, I got to take another break here, and then we'll come right back afterwards and talk about that, because I want to wrap it up with that, because I think that's really important for people to understand, especially when we make a mistake around this, because all of us make this leadership mistake at one time or another, because we're trying to be careful with resources. So this is Strategy Sherpa Show. This is David Chavez. November 9th, Phoenix, Arizona. We're doing an accountability show, whole workshop for the day to how to hold your people accountable better. We're going to take a break. We'll be right back. This is David Chavez, the Strategy Sherpa Show. Thank you. Hey, everyone. Just wanted to remind you, tomorrow we have a webinar from 1 to 2 Central Time. That's 11 a.m. on the Pacific and 2 o'clock on the Eastern. We are going to, for 1 hour, Preston's going to be going over how to create more efficiencies through processes. And but we wanted to come back to Christi. She's been a great guest so far, talking about things that haven't been talked about yet on the show, the way she's talking about them. And that's just because she's an extraordinary leader. and she is really amazing at growing teams and getting companies off the ground. So, Christi, share with us some of the challenges you had with some of the 360s. So you realized that the quiet people needed a little more help, and tell us some of the things you had to do to get everything back in line.
Sure. So we did a number of things. One is that we certainly did a restructure, which that's always hard, having those difficult conversations. We also, bringing back things that maybe have been dismantled. So it could be everything from, hey, our client relationship management system needed to be repaired, to having meetings that you were able to share and have that transparency on those key performance indicators. And I know we always talk about the scorecard, or looking at how the organization is doing, but do you really do it? And that's where I love data. I can go too far into it, but really interpreting it so that everybody understands the why behind what we're asking. So having that, bring those things back in. Also, having those office hours where, people can schedule meetings with me. So I have time blocked out every single day now that I have an actual executive assistant, because I did not have one before, and anybody in the organization can schedule time with me. So we were able to institute that, and then make sure that, having the restructure included layers, so that it wasn't depleting and burning out some of my key leaders. We needed to have really bench, because when a leader would leave, for example, that threw things off course, but also back to that 360 review where it's like people are unavailable or you didn't have access to people. Having those middle managers actually supported the organization to be more effective. Something that I may have said, oh, we can't afford. Or maybe I will get pushback to say, oh, why would we need that? Well, we need it, and just to be really clear on my voice that no, I'm not going to take a shortcut here. We've got to invest right, to get the results that we need. So, and I would say lastly, and I think this is a big one, is having, you mentioned Kane and also another colleague, Lisa Jane Vargas, really spending time with our new leaders, developing them with the workshops that we've been doing with Assured Strategy. They've been really helpful to the team, and having that as a resource and going back to those things. So it's not one and done. If you're one and done in it, it's not going to be effective. So going back to and reminding people and showing them how to use it, so it's a common language that everyone uses.
Yeah, and you said so many important things in this last thing. So, when we're working with teams, we talk about because we're primarily scaling up coaches, and Rockefeller number habit number 5 from the scaling up system is ongoing employee input is collected to identify obstacles and opportunities. So what I hear from you right now is you were taking advantage of talking to the people and really hearing what they're saying and helping them understand that, hey, maybe I didn't give you everything you need, so I need you to tell me what you need so that we can get it for you. It's not going to mean that I'm not going to challenge you a little bit, and I'm not going to still hold you accountable to the cost that I'm spending on you, but I'm going to listen to what you're saying and try to patch some of those things. And then you're going to bring accountability in. You're going to start talking to them a little bit more. You made yourself a little bit more available so they could get help solving some of the problems that they need. Not so you can solve them, but so you can help them solve them, right? And then you got them some training and things like that. So it started to turn around for you. And what I wanted to say is, like, you talked about making sure they understood the why, right? I think that when I fell as a leader in my communication, it's always that darn why that gets me. I didn't tell somebody the why because I was going too fast. And, you're laughing, so you must share this pain with me, because we know better. We know that the why really connects them to what we're trying to get done. And sometimes we just forget to say those things, right? So
Yeah, I have had to slow us down a little bit. Look, at the end of the day, I think both of us are probably fast and quick, and I think most leaders are. But remember that most of your staff aren't. That's not their pace. They're not
That's right.
typically fast. So I have to remember I've got to slow it down a little bit, and it's painful. It's real painful for me sometimes. One of the tools I often use when we're talking about things, because I can make decisions like that, move, go, let's on to the next thing, is I have to slow down. And it was a thing I had used from previous organizations, a decision-making process that really talks about like the RC model, like who's the approver, just really breaking it down to slow us down for a little bit. Like who's approving this? The R, who's recommending it or who's bringing voice to the issue, who's being consulted, the C, I, who's implementing, or I'm sorry, who needs to be informed. That's the big one. Everybody misses usually the informed piece because we usually go from R, we got to, we recognize or we recommend something, to E, which is execution. And nowhere in the A of who's supposed to approve this and who should be consulted and who should be informed, completely missed. And that's where we end up having to play cleanup again. So a lot of janitorial services that I offer now as a leader because I failed to get those other areas taken care of.
Hold on. I love it. I love it that you're calling yourself I'm the janitorial services I'm offering. That's too funny. So I sort of felt your pain while you were talking about that because I'm just reflecting on some of my own issues around sometimes forgetting to explain the why. But I wanted to make sure that I brought that back up because it's so critical and it seems to be something all leaders forget sometimes because we're trying to get so many things done and we don't understand even on some of the smallest things if we just am I breaking up bad? Okay, on the smallest things we really need to, right, if you will. And so then I loved when you were talking a little bit, and I want to bring this one last thing up that came to my mind is when we're challenging people on accountability, if we don't look at some of the results that they have right now, they have a tendency to not really answer our question. They tell us what we want to hear. And so oftentimes we walk away from those conversations feeling like we have the answer, and it's not exactly the way we interpret it to be. Matter of fact, maybe not as much as done as we would have liked it to be done. And so what I say to leaders often is probably 80% of your questions are never really answered. So you have to really pay attention and really be a good listener.
Yeah, I think that what I've experienced is that look, my style and the way I communicate, I can go on many different paths very quickly. So I'm really focused here on this conversation with you, David, because I don't want to go too far, too many paths. But what I have noticed is that when I'm with people and maybe I am asking the hard questions, all of a sudden, look over here happens, right? The magic trick of deflection, where it's like, oh, well, did you know that this is going on? Or let me tell you something else that you may need to know. And then all of a sudden I'm like, wait a minute, I was focused on this issue, but now they've got my attention over here. And that was something I could do a whole show on that one. And because it was very painful.
Yeah. Well, I just want to say this. I've known you for a while now, for probably 3 or 4 years. You are an amazing leader. The people in Assured Strategy really respect you a lot and how you show up to things. I've had the opportunity to work with you a little bit individually too, and I found you to be an amazing leader. And I thank you so much for being on the show today. You've brought so much humility to the show, and it just shows how great of leader you really are and how you're talking about things. And look, everybody, this Strategy Sherpa show, it is to help people through other people's issues and to really learn from each other as leaders through some of our things that we didn't do as well as we'd like. And you can see Christi's humility in sharing some of this today.